Hello YouTube! So it's now April and I haven't done a wrap up at all this year, so time for a wrap up. So this is basically kind of everything that I've read from January until March, but sort of. So in March I read a lot of manga, so all of those wrap-ups are going to go into a different video. So basically this is just everything that I read from January to February, manga included, and then the physical books I read in March, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot here, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know how to really organize this, so hopefully this all makes sense. So I'm going to start off with the kind of novels and audiobooks that I read, and then I'm going to go into the manga, save that for last. So audiobooks first. The first audiobook that I read this year was The Gilded Worms. Ooh, not The Gilded Worms. That is a different book. The first audiobook that I read this year was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chachki, I believe. This is a heist novel, and it is a group of sort of outcasts, and they go on a heist of some sorts. And I know that sounds like much like another book, but you're allowed to have similar premises to books. This is a different sort of world, and it's a different sort of heist with different stakes. I think I rated this book maybe like 3 stars, and I think it mostly had to do with the audiobook. So, the audiobook for this is terrible. Like, literally, if you're gonna read The Gilded Worms, why do I keep on calling it The Gilded Worms? If you're gonna read The Gilded Wolves, do not read the audiobook. It took all of the joy out of this book that I would have had. This book is told in several perspectives. There are several male characters and several female characters. So in the audiobook there were 2 narrators. There's a male narrator for the male characters and a female narrator for the female characters. The female narrator was great. I liked her. She was perfectly fine. The problem was the male narrator, who was the most boring, lacking of joy person I have ever heard read an audiobook. I'm so upset. He was just very like monotone, and it didn't feel, I didn't get any excitement out of it. In this book there are 2 characters that have like a past sort of relationship, one night stand sort of thing, and they both like very obviously still love each other, but and like want each other all of the time. And so there's this like great like sexual tension between these 2 characters. I'm on board, totally, except just like the male narrator just took everything out of it. There are things that I know if I was reading these words myself, I would have been very excited by it, but I was not here for it the way this book was told to me. I'm just very upset, and I feel like I couldn't get into like the characters or their relationship as much as I would have wanted to, just because of the way the audiobook was read, which is unfortunate. Things I did like about this, I did really like the world in this. It feels like it had a lot of like Egyptian influence in it, which is something that we really don't see a lot, or I haven't seen a lot. Kind of this fantasy world that has a lot of kind of ancient Egyptian elements to it, which was really interesting. I enjoyed reading about that. This book was okay, but it didn't really like spark anything like really enticing in me, I guess. I don't know, it didn't make me want more, I think. It left on kind of a cliffhanger, but I am not super interested to read the next one. So The Gilded Wolves got 3 stars from me. The second audiobook that I read was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So The Poppy War is about a girl who is like raised in she's like a war orphan, raised in a poor village, basically selling opium to drug addicts, and she gets the chance to take the test to enter this like really prestigious military academy. And it's kind of her journey joining this military academy and like becoming a soldier and learning about the connection between gods and humans. I really liked this book. There are several things about this that I really liked. The first thing is that I never knew where this book was going. I thought that we would spend half of the book her testing trying to get into this school. No, first little bit of the book. Then I thought it would be all her whole time in school. No, not that. It just kept on throwing so many twists and turns at me, and I had no idea where this was going to go or where we were going to end up at the end of it, which was really, really refreshing. The audiobook was really great. I think I read this one on Scribd. I believe I got The Gilded Wolves on Scribd also. And also, I feel like this might be like a good like kind of starter fantasy thing, because the real like hardcore fantasy elements like don't hit you until like halfway through the book, and the main character is kind of finding out about these fantasy elements along with the reader, which I felt was a really cool journey to go on. The book is also rooted in a lot of history, so it's kind of based off of the second, what was it, Sino-Japanese War? So a war between China and Japan. So it's basically, I think it's based off of like Japan's treatment of China during this war, and so it's got this kind of like, it's not historical fiction, but it has roots in history, if that makes sense. Yeah, this was a really good book. I think there's a second one that's already out, which I'm really interested in reading, so hopefully I will get to that soon. I think I gave The Poppy War 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was an actual physical book, and that was Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. So this is kind of like a sequel trilogy, the start of a sequel trilogy to The Raven Cycle, where I am obsessed with The Raven Cycle. If you saw my review, please go check out my review of The Raven Cycle. I worked very hard on it, and it took a lot of time and energy out of my life, so please watch it. But it is full of spoilers. Anyway, Call Down the Hawk is kind of this sequel-ish trilogy to The Raven Cycle. So it is about the character Ronan, and he is a dreamer, so basically he can manifest his dreams into real life. And it's about him and his brothers and kind of this like tangled web of a world filled with dreamers and people who want to get rid of the dreamers and possibly the end of the world and mysterious paintings and family secrets, and it's so good. I was so nervous to read this because Ronan, to be honest, Ronan isn't my favorite character from The Raven Cycle. I mean, I love him, but he's not my favorite. So I was a little bit apprehensive about reading a book that was all about him because he's like very aggressive. And my favorite character is Gansey, who is like the opposite of aggressive, so, but it's also about Ronan's brothers, Declan and Matthew, and there's also a few new characters that I introduced. So that kind of breaks up the abrasiveness that is Ronan. I felt like this book was very raw and like really hit you with a lot of things all of the time, and I really liked that for some reason, but it was a very different reading experience than The Raven Cycle. If you like The Raven Cycle, definitely give this a chance. Again, with my things that I love about The Raven Cycle, I also love about Call Down the Hawk is that it's set in Virginia. If I haven't made this clear in any of my discussions about anything related to The Raven Cycle, I live in Virginia. I've lived in Virginia my whole life, and having these books that I love so much, set in my home state is amazing. It's full of locations and places that I know and love. So this book takes place mostly like in Northern Virginia, where kind of I am located, maybe not exactly where I am. They go to a place in the National Harbor. There's like this big statue of a man coming out of the beach and the river. It's really cool. Lots of cosplay pictures have been taken there because there's an anime convention on the National Harbor. But anyway, so the name of that statue was named, I knew instantly where they were, and I could picture the scene completely, and I love that. Hello, editing Christy here. So I want to make a point about this so like nobody yells at me in the comments for whatever reason, but I did mention the National Harbor right here, which is not in Virginia, it's in Maryland, and also a lot of this book takes place in Georgetown, which is not in Virginia, but I feel like my point still stands, is that this book is full of like places that are very familiar to me and lots of names that are really familiar to me. It's like my general area. There's also a lot of time spent in Springfield, which was very interesting, but and McLean. So, but I just want to make that clear so nobody, those Maryland purists come into my video saying the National Harbor is in Maryland and not in Virginia. I know. The point is I'm very familiar with this location. So, yeah. Just wanted to, I guess, make that clear. Okay, back to the video. Is this how, like, people who live in New York, when they read books set in New York, is this how they feel all of the time? Because I love this feeling, to know exactly where something is in a book and be able to picture it completely. So that's one thing that I love about Call Down the Hawk. I'm not very enthusiastic about my home state most of the time, but when it comes to books that are related to the Raven Cycle, I'm very excited. Found in this book that I ended up really liking Ronan's brother Declan, also Matthew's brother, but not the name I was going for. But I ended up really liking Declan. In the Raven Cycle, he's kind of this like jock jerk older brother. I mean, Ronan's probably more of a jerk to Declan, and that's the way he is. You kind of see a different side to Declan and the lies he has to keep and the secrets he has to hold, and like his journey to find out the answers to all of the questions he has in his life, and I just ended up really liking him a lot. Yeah, I can't wait for the next 2 books because I really want to read more about Declan Lynch. And of course, anytime they mention Gansey, I just got way too excited. He's not in this, but he's like been texted to, and there's phone calls made to him, and I got very excited. Not enough Adam and Ronan in this, suspiciously. So hopefully more of their relationship in the next 2 books. The next book, physical book, that I read was A Winter's Promise by Christiel Dabos. So this is book 1 of the Mirror Visitor. I think there are 4 of them. So it's basically this girl who can read objects with her hands and kind of see the emotions attached to these objects, and she is married off to a very stern man from a different country area. So basically the world has been broken up into like floating islands, I think. So she gets like shipped off and married or engaged to this man from another arc, they call them, and he is very stern and basically doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And it's kind of her adjusting to this new world, finding out about all of these, like, this political intrigue and like what's really going on behind the scenes and everything like that. And it was really enjoyable. I really liked it. There were a few things that kind of irked me a little bit. There's a lot of lack of communication. You find out later why there's a lack of communication, but it's still very frustrating to read, and probably they could have achieved the same outcome with not having all of that lack of communication. That was so very frustrating. That's like my #1 pet peeve, is just when characters don't talk to each other, or it's just like they ask a question and it's like, he said nothing and then she left the room. Like, that's so annoying. I hate it. There was a lot of that going on in this book, but I did really enjoy it overall. It is translated from French. I don't know anything about French, but the amount of words, like, if you need to study for your SAT, like, read this book, because the vocabulary in this is like all words I haven't seen since I took the SAT. So very verbose, I guess, or a high vocabulary, which like isn't really like good or bad. It was just something that I noticed a lot, and it was interesting because it is translated from French. Not that I'm like expecting it to have a lower vocabulary. I don't know anything about translated literature, so it was just interesting to see. So also, another question I have about this, if you've read this book, how old are these characters? Because it is booked as a like YA fantasy sort of book, but I have no idea how old these characters are. Are they teenagers? Are they like in their 20s? who knows? I really can't picture it. If you've read the series, please let me know, because I don't have any sort of like reference for what these characters really look like. The final book that I read that was physical was Convenience Store Woman, and this is by Sayaka Murata, and this is a translated from Japanese novel. So I read this in a day. So it's basically about this woman who works at a convenience store, and she has worked at this convenience store for 18 years, and it's kind of about all of the people around her putting all this pressure on her to get married, have a kid, stop working at the convenience store, get a real job, that sort of thing. And it's about her wondering why she can't just live her life the way she wants to. So there are several things about this book. I feel like this book was very timely to read, because it's a lot of the people in this woman's life in this book are telling her, why are you working at this like low-paying service job? Why don't you get a real job? That is a relative attitude to the current times. Hi, it's Editing Christy again. The footage, me explaining my idea about this book, doesn't make a lot of sense, so I'm going to try to explain it here. So in Convenience Store Woman, the main character, and I'm sorry, my camera is broken. So in this book, the main character is a woman that works at a convenience store. It's typically seen as a low-paying, minimum wage, part-time job. A lot of college students or high school students work at these convenience stores, and there's typically a large turnover rate in these types of jobs, and there's not really a lot of people who spend, 18 years working at these convenience stores. It's not really seen as like a career by a lot of people, like the people in this woman's life. What I meant about how this is kind of timely is that, at least in the US, there's been a conversation about kind of living wage and these sort of service jobs, and people working in grocery stores or at fast food restaurants, convenience stores, that type of thing, and do they deserve to be paid a living wage and for it to be seen as a real job and not just something that teenagers do for pocket money. Obviously, they're real jobs and people deserve to be paid a living wage. There are people who are in these jobs because it's the only job that they can have, but there are also people who are in these jobs because they like doing the work, and that's perfectly fine. Like, a job is a job, and everybody should be paid to be able to live off of that job. They're like, honestly, for me, there's no question. And what I meant by timely is, there is that discussion, there has been that discussion around kind of a living wage in the US, but especially now with this whole coronavirus thing, is that the people that are really like putting their lives on the line are these people that are working these service jobs, the food delivery drivers, grocery store workers, convenience store workers, like people who like are essential. And so now the attitude generally is that, oh, these people are heroes, they're putting their lives on the line, they could catch this disease at any time, and so we really appreciate them, when a few months ago people were saying that they didn't deserve to be able to live off what they were paid. I felt like this book was interesting to read in this sort of climate, like not really sort of directly related, but I kind of thought about those things as I was reading this book, because a lot of the attitudes that people have towards the main character in this book are that she needs to not work this job that's just a part-time job for college students or high school students. So I think that's kind of where I was coming from when I said this book was timely. This woman is fine with working a job that other people seem like to look down upon, and she doesn't understand why. She loves her job, she's very good at her job, and she just wants to keep on working there, and everybody's telling her not to. All of the other people in her life were really, really annoying about it, because they just didn't let her live her life the way she wanted to, and it sucked for her. I think it was trying to say, like, let people work the jobs that they want to work if they're having a good time. That seems to be the attitude of the book, because everybody was so freaking annoying around her. I also felt like I didn't really get a ton out of it. It's kind of just like a 3-star book to me. It didn't really, wasn't revolutionary or anything like that. All of the quotes on the back of this book are just talking about how like funny it is and like how hilarious this book is, and I kind of found this book like pretty depressing, because it's about this woman who is not being able to like live the life that she wants to live, and the people who are just like being like, oh, this is hilarious, like I don't think are seeing like the bleakness of this woman's life, that everybody around her is telling her what to do and she doesn't want to do any of it, but she's forced to do it. I don't know. I'm just like, all of these reviewers can just like jump out a window. Okay, so those are all of like the novels that I read. So time to get into this large stack of manga that I read a long time ago. First off, I had volumes 6 through 8 of Aloha Ride. So this is kind of the arc of the story where we get our second male love interest introduced, Kikuchi, who is like a precious bean, and I love him, and I feel bad for him and the way people treat him. Futaba has to kind of like decide maybe who she wants to be with. Also, Ko is being like a jerk. I really like Aoharu Ride, but one of its faults is that the characters don't talk to each other, and Ko especially, like Futaba tries to talk to Ko, but he's just like, no, I'm gonna be moody and stuff like that, and I am just like not here for that. I think things get better kind of along the way. I feel like Ko needs to learn to communicate, and he has one of his friends, I can't remember the character's name, but he's like, yo, can you like talk to Futaba and like tell her what you're feeling? And he's just like, no, I can't do that right now, I'm gonna go be sad for a while, and it's just annoying, and I'm here for Kikuchi, but I know how this is gonna end up. So I read volume 4 of Snow White with the Red Hair. This is just like super cute. There are some really good developments between Shirayuki and Zen's relationship in this, which is very comforting and super adorable, and I love it. And you kind of get a little backstory about Zen and his feelings on like kind of like relationships and friendships, and how being like a prince has affected those. So it's a really interesting and cute volume of this manga, and I'm just like, I love it, and I'm very behind on this series and I need to catch up. Next, I read volume 3 of Witch Hat Atelier. So this is a manga about a girl who finds out that you can learn magic instead of having to be born with it, and it's her being basically taught how to be a magician. And it's cute and everything, but I don't know if I'm going to be continuing this series. It just, like, it's cute, but the art style really isn't my sort of thing, and I'm not invested enough to really pursue the rest of this story. So the art is really good, but it's just not what I'm looking for. The story is good, but it's just not what I'm looking for. Basically, it's not the manga's fault, it's my fault. I read 3 volumes of this, and I don't think I'm going to be continuing with this series. Next, we're almost done, I swear. So next, I read volumes 1 and 2 of SP Baby. So this is just 2-volume series, so this is all that there is in the series. So this is about a girl who's looking for a job. She runs into this man, well-dressed man, and she like saves him from something, and she ends up being recruited to be his bodyguard. And it's kind of like her developing some sort of relationship with this guy, and her, I guess, becoming her own person. And it was really nice to read a story about like not high schoolers. Like, I love high school shoujo romance, like that's my thing, but it was nice to read something about maybe somebody who was a little closer to my age. I didn't think this was like super special, probably like 3 stars. If you want something like quick and like kind of fun, you could read it, but it's not really gonna go on my like top favorites manga list. It was just kind of like, okay. I don't think I've ever really read such a short series before either, so maybe I was like kind of craving a little more character development and a little bit more story, so I'm not 100% sure where that comes from. The final manga for this video that I read was Waiting for Spring, volume 12. This is the second to last, or the almost last second to last volume of my new favorite manga series that I've been reading since last year, and I love it. So after this volume, there's only one more volume left, and I'm so upset. I love this series with all my heart. So this volume, we get a lot of relationship development between our favorite characters, and things happen, and it's super cute and fluffy, and I love it. Like, it could have ended here, but I'm so glad that there's one more volume where we get to kind of like wrap up any loose ties, things like that. So yes, this is my favorite new series. I'm so glad I started reading this because it's absolutely adorable, and I am going to be very, very sad when I read the last volume. And that's everything that I read. I have several more volumes of manga that I read, but you will get those in another video. That was a lot. If you have read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them. I'd be interested to discuss any of these with anyone, especially if you know how old the characters are in A Winter's Promise. I really need to know. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more bookish and nerdy content from me. That is all I've got for you guys today. I'm Christy Lou. Till next time, matane!